She kicked a pregnant woman at her wedding? The reason will shock you. The cathedral was a symphony of white orchids and whispered wealth. Sophia stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror, a vision in French, lace, and cold perfection. Each pearl sewn into her bodice was a testament to the Van Horn legacy, a name she was marrying into, a fortress she was entering. Julian Van Horn, handsome and heir to an empire, watched her with adoring eyes from the doorway. "Ready, my love?" he asked, his voice like warm honey. She offered a practiced, dazzling smile. "For you?" Always, but her eyes, the color of winter frost, remained untouched by the warmth of her expression. This wedding was the final, glittering piece of a meticulously constructed life. It was about security, power, and erasing the lingering scent of desperation from her past. The ceremony was a flawless performance. Sophia floated down the aisle on the arm of a distant uncle. Her own father long since vanished into a haze of debt and disappointment. She repeated her vows with convincing fervor, her gaze locked on Julian's, building the perfect fairy tale for the 500 esteemed guests. The reception was held in the Van Horn Estate's legendary ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast a kaleidoscope of light over a sea of champagne flutes and designer gowns. Sophia held court, her laugh a tinkling bell, her every gesture calculated to charm. Julian was never far, his hand a possessive, gentle weight on the small of her back. It was during the first dance, a waltz that made them look like porcelain figures in a music box, that a ripple disrupted the perfection. A woman, her face pale and drawn, appeared at the edge of the dance floor. Her simple dress was woefully out of place amidst the couture, and her hands were cradled protectively over a pronounced rounded belly. A security guard moved to intercept her, but she dodged him with a surprising burst of energy, her eyes fixed on Sophia. The music faltered as she stepped into their path, forcing Julian to halt. "Sophia," the woman said, her voice trembling but clear. "You said it was over." "You promised." A flicker of irritation crossed Sophia's face before she smoothed it into a mask of concerned confusion. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" Her tone was ice, designed to freeze out the unpleasantness. "You know me," the woman insisted, her voice gaining strength. "Lena. Look at me. Look at this." She gestured to her stomach, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You can't just marry him and pretend none of it happened." A murmur swept through the crowd. Julian's brow furrowed. "Sophia? What is this? Who is this woman?" Sophia's smile was brittle. "I have no idea, darling. Probably some desperate soul looking for a handout." She took a step forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper meant only for Lena. "Leave. Now. You're embarrassing yourself." Lena stood her ground, a desperate courage overtaking her fear. "Tell him, Sophia, or I will. Tell him about the money you took. Tell him why you really left the city last spring." Panic, sharp and acrid, shot through Sophia. This was not part of the plan. This stain on her perfect day had to be removed. Immediately. Her composure shattered. "How dare you?" she spat, her voice losing its cultured polish, revealing a harder, coarser edge. "Get out! You're nothing. A pathetic, lying little..." In a blind rage fueled by fear and towering arrogance, Sophia drew back her foot, encased in a custom-designed stiletto, and kicked out. The sharp heel connected brutally with Lena's swollen abdomen. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Time seemed to freeze. Lena's eyes widened in shock and agony before she crumpled to the polished floor with a sickening cry, clutching her stomach. The silence that followed was deafening, and into that silence, as Lena writhed in pain on the floor, a single, agonized word escaped her lips, meant for Sophia alone, but heard by every stunned guest in the front rows. "Sister." The word hung in the air, a bomb that had detonated in the heart of the gilded ballroom. "Sister." For a heartbeat, there was only the sound of Lena's ragged, pained breathing on the floor. Then chaos erupted. Julian was the first to break from his stupor. He dropped to his knees beside Lena, his face ashen. "Call an ambulance." "Now!" he roared, his voice cracking with the authority that sent servants scrambling. He looked up at Sophia, who stood frozen, her kick foot still slightly raised, her face a mask of stunned horror. not at Lena's pain, but at the revealed secret. "Sophia, what have you done?" he whispered, the adoration in his eyes replaced by a dawning, terrible confusion. Sophia stumbled back as if scalded. She's lying. She's not my... She's just a madwoman." But her protest was weak, drowned out by the murmurs of the crowd that were quickly turning from shock to revulsion. Phones were out, discreetly recording the scandal of the century. The wedding planner, a flustered woman in head-to-toe black, tried to usher guests away, but it was like trying to hold back the tide with a teacup. The spectacle was too grotesque, too compelling. Sophia's mother, Eleanor, a slender woman who had aged into a state of permanent, pinched anxiety, pushed her way through the crowd. Her face was a thundercloud of fury and fear. She grabbed Sophia's arm, her nails digging into the lace. "You stupid girl," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "I told you to handle it. I told you to make sure she stayed away." This admission, whispered but overheard by those closest, only added fuel to the fire. Julian's head snapped up from where he was cradling Lena's head. He looked from Eleanor's furious face to Sophia's panicked one, the pieces of a horrifying puzzle beginning to click into place. The wail of sirens cut through the din. Paramedics burst into the ballroom, their efficient, urgent movements a stark contrast to the frozen tableau of the wealthy guests. They gently moved Julian aside and began tending to Lena, who was now sobbing quietly, her hands never leaving her stomach. As they lifted her onto a gurney, Lena's eyes fluttered open. They found Sophia's across the room. There was no anger left, only a profound, devastating sorrow. "My sister," she breathed again, for the whole world to hear this time, before the paramedics wheeled her away. Julian rose to his feet. He walked slowly towards Sophia, his steps heavy. The love of an hour ago was gone, replaced by a cold, hard scrutiny. He looked at the woman he had just vowed to cherish, now revealed as a liar and a monster. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice flat. "Dead. Is she your sister?" Sophia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her carefully constructed world, built on lies and omission, was collapsing around her in real time. The glittering ballroom felt like a cage, and every eye upon her was a judge and jury. She had not just kicked a pregnant woman. She had kicked open a door to a past she had sworn was buried forever, and the darkness was now flooding in, threatening to drown them all. The ambulance tore through the manicured lanes of the Van Horn estate, its siren a screaming declaration that the perfect facade was broken. Julian followed in his own car, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The image of Sophia's vicious kick played on a loop in his mind, superimposed with Lena's heartbroken whisper, "Sister." In the sterile, bright chaos of the emergency room, he was a stranger. He wasn't family. He wasn't anything to the woman now fighting for her and her baby's life behind swinging double doors. A nurse finally took pity on him. "Are you the father?" she asked gently. The question was a physical blow. The father. The possibility, monstrous and sudden, unfolded in his mind. Sophia's mysterious retreat last spring, her evasiveness whenever he asked about her past. Lena's accusation, "Tell him why you really left the city." "No," he managed to choke out. I was getting married today." The nurse's professional sympathy cooled instantly. She'd seen the news alerts on her phone. "I see. You'll have to wait in the waiting room, sir." Back at the estate, the party was unequivocally over. Guests fled like rats from a sinking ship, their whispers already morphing into full-blown, scandalous narratives for their social circles. The ballroom, once a scene of unparalleled luxury, was now a crime scene of sorts, littered with abandoned champagne flutes in the ghost of violence. Sophia was locked in the master suite, her wedding dress a crumpled prison of lace and shame on the floor. Her mother, Eleanor, paced like a caged tiger. "You were supposed to give her the money and make her sign the NDA, she seethed, her voice a harsh rasp. "Not invite her to the wedding to make a scene." "I did give her the money," Sophia shot back, her voice shrill. "Months ago. She promised she'd leave the country. How was I to know she'd get greedy? How was I to know she'd—" She trailed off, unable to say the word pregnant. You knew she was unstable. You knew she resented you, your father's bastard daughter, always lurking in the shadows. Thinking she was entitled to a piece of our lives, Eleanor spat the words like poison. And you idiot, you made her the victim in front of everyone. The history tumbled out in their hissed argument. Lena was the product of their father's brief affair. Sophia had grown up knowing of her half-sister's existence, a dirty secret her mother insisted on ignoring. But when their father abandoned them both, Sophia, in a rare moment of conscience, had reached out. They'd had a tentative secret relationship for a time, a connection built on shared abandonment. But as Sophia climbed the social ladder, Lena became an inconvenience, a reminder of a tainted bloodline she was desperate to escape. When Lena had come to her, pregnant and desperate, Sophia had seen her worst nightmare coming true, a permanent, living connection to that shameful past. She'd paid her off, demanding silence and disappearance. She thought she'd solved the problem. She never imagined Lena would keep the baby. She never imagined she'd have the audacity to show up. A sharp knock on the door made them both jump. It was Julian. His tuxedo was disavenged, his face a grim mask. He didn't enter. He just stood in the doorway, his eyes sweeping over the scene of the destroyed dress and in the two panicked women. "The baby is stable," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Lena has a fractured rib and is under observation. The doctors say it was a miracle the kick didn't do worse." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "She's asking for you, Sophia." Sophia recoiled. "I'm not going anywhere near her." "She says she has something to tell you," Julian continued, his gaze boring into her. "Something about the baby's father." The air left the room. Sophia felt the walls closing in. The secret was not just about a hidden sister. It was deeper, darker. And Julian was no longer her protector. He was an investigator, and she was his prime suspect. The hospital corridor was a tunnel of fluorescent light and antiseptic smell. Julian led the way, his silence a heavier burden than any accusation. Sophia followed, wrapped in a cashmere coat over her slip, her face bare and pale. She looked like a ghost of the radiant bride from hours before. They entered Lena's private room. She looked small and broken in the hospital bed, monitors beeping a steady, reassuring rhythm beside her. Her eyes were closed, but they fluttered open as the door shut. When she saw Sophia, a flicker of fear crossed her face before it settled into a weary resolve. "You came," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Julian said you had something to say," Sophia said, her tone clipped, defensive. She stood near the door, as far from the bed as possible. Lena's gaze shifted to Julian, who stood by the window, his arms crossed, observing. "You should hear this too," she said softly. "Lena, whatever lies you've concocted," Sophia began, but Julian cut her off with a sharp look. "Let her speak." Lena took a shaky breath, her hand resting on her belly. "The money you gave me, it wasn't for me. It was for him, for us. To start over." "Him?" Julian asked, the single word loaded with dread. Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I tried to stay away, Sophia. I really did, but he found me. He always finds me." "Who, Lena?" Julian's voice was gentle but insistent. "Who is the father?" Lena looked directly at Sophia, a world of pain and shared history in her gaze. "He said you belonged to him. That this," she gestured to her stomach, "was just a reminder, a way to make sure you never forgot where you came from." Sophia's blood ran cold. A name, unspoken, hung in the air between them. A ghost from the past she had tried so desperately to outrun. "Marcus," Lena whispered, the name dropping into the room like a stone. Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. All the color drained from her face. She swayed on her feet, and for a moment, Julian thought she might faint. "Marcus?" Julian repeated, confusion etching his features. "Who is Marcus?" Sophia couldn't speak. She could only stare at Lena in abject horror. "Marcus Slate," Lena clarified, her voice gaining a sliver of strength now that the secret was out. "Sophia's ex-fiancé." The revelation landed with the force of a physical blow. Julian knew the name. Sophia had mentioned him once, a long time ago, A fleeting, youthful relationship she'd dismissed as a mistake. She'd said he was out of the picture, gone. He's not gone, Lena said, as if reading Julian's thoughts. He never left. He's been watching, waiting. When he found out Sophia was marrying you, he saw it as the ultimate betrayal. She looked at Sophia, her expression a mixture of pity and fear. He came to me. He was drunk, angry. He said if he couldn't have you, then he'd make sure a part of him would always be connected to you. Through me, through your niece or nephew. The room spun. Sophia leaned against the wall for support. Marcus, violent, possessive, unhinged Marcus. She had thought she'd escaped him. She'd changed her number, moved apartments, curated a new life. She had given Lena money to get away, yes, but partly to get Marcus away, to remove the last thread that connected him to her. She never dreamed he would sink his hooks into her vulnerable, impressionable half-sister. She never imagined he would use Lena as a vessel for his twisted revenge. Julian looked from Lena's terrified face to Sophia's shattered one. The puzzle was complete, and the picture it formed was monstrous. His bride wasn't just a woman who hid a poor sister. She was a woman who had fled a dangerous man, and in her cowardice and pride had left her own sister to face him alone. And now that darkness had followed her right into the heart of his world, embodied in the child growing inside Lena. The baby wasn't just a symbol of Sophia's shameful past. It was a living, breathing threat. And Marcus Slate was its father. The drive back to the estate was shrouded in a silence so thick it felt suffocating. Julian's mind raced, processing the horrifying truth. The beautiful, elegant woman beside him was a fugitive from her own life, and she had dragged him and his entire family into the crosshairs of a madman. He thought of Lena, alone and terrified in that hospital bed, used as a pawn in a sick game of obsession. His anger towards Sophia began to curdle into something colder, more calculating. She had known. She had known what Marcus was capable of, and she had said nothing. She had let him believe her past was a closed book, when in reality, it was a ticking bomb. He didn't go to the master suite. Instead, he went to his father's study, a room of dark wood and leather that smelled of old money and authority. Alistair Van Horn was still awake, nursing a glass of brandy, his face grim. The news had already reached him. "Well?" Alistair's voice was gravelly. "Is it true?" "It's worse," Julian said, sinking into the chair opposite the desk. He told him everything. The hidden sister, the ex-fiancé, the violent coercion, the kick that had been born not just of cruelty, but of sheer blind terror. Alistair listened, his expression growing grimmer with each word. When Julian finished, he set his glass down with a definitive click. "This is a mess, Julian. A public, unmitigated disaster. The prenup is ironclad, but the reputational damage..." He shook his head. "This man, this Slate, he's a predator. He sees an opportunity now. He'll use that child as leverage forever." "I know," Julian said, his voice hardening, "which is why we're not going to give him the chance. What do you propose?" "We can't make the girl disappear," Alistair said, though the cold look in his eyes suggested the thought had crossed his mind. "No," Julian agreed, "but we can control the narrative. We protect Lena. She's the victim here. We bring her into the fold. We provide the best medical care, security, legal representation. We show the world that the Van Horns take care of their own." Alistair raised an eyebrow. "She's not our own, Julian. She's the bastard child of your wife's bastard father, carrying the child of a psychopath." "To the world she will be," Julian insisted, a plan forming in his mind. "She is Sophia's sister. That makes her family. Sophia's public breakdown will be framed as a trauma response. The shock of seeing her long-lost, pregnant sister attacked by security, causing a tragic accident. We spin it. We bury the kick. We bury Marcus. We make this a story about family reconciliation and protection." It was a ruthless, brilliant PR strategy. It meant rewriting history in real time. It meant lies upon lies. But it was the only way to salvage something from the wreckage. "And Sophia?" Alistair asked. Julian's face was a stone mask. She will play her part. She will be the remorseful, traumatized wife and sister. She will publicly embrace Lena. She will do whatever it takes to fix this. Or she will find herself completely alone, with nothing and no one to protect her from Marcus. His love for her had evaporated, replaced by a cold determination to protect his family's name. Sophia was now a liability to be managed. Upstairs, Sophia listened at the study door, her ear pressed against the cold wood. She heard every word. The cold, transactional way they discussed her fate chilled her to the bone. She was not a person to them anymore. She was a problem to be solved. Julian's protection had been conditional on her perfection, and she had failed. Now her safety depended on her ability to perform a new role, the penitent liar. Tears of self-pity welled in her eyes, but she brushed them away angrily. Self-pity was a luxury she could no longer afford. Marcus was back, and Julian's plan, however cold, was the only shield she had left. She had to make them believe she was compliant. She had to be more convincing than ever before. Her life and the life of the sister she had tried to discard depended on it. The Van Horn public relations machine moved with terrifying efficiency. By morning, the narrative was already shifting. A carefully worded statement was released to the press, expressing the family's profound shock and grief over the unfortunate accident at the wedding caused by overzealous security personnel misinterpreting a deeply emotional reunion between long-separated sisters. Photographs leaked from anonymous sources showed a grim-faced Julian arriving at the hospital, and later, a grainy but touching image of Sophia sitting by Lena's bedside, her head bowed as if in prayer or remorse. The story of the kick was being systematically erased, replaced by a tale of tragic misunderstanding and familial love. Inside Lena's hospital room, the atmosphere was anything but loving. Sophia sat in the chair Julian had dictated she occupy, her posture stiff. A publicist hovered, coaching them on their lines for the inevitable press conference. Lena, you'll express your gratitude for the Van Horn family's support. You'll say you should have contacted them through proper channels, but you were overwhelmed and scared. You hold no ill will. Understood? Lena, pale and tired, just nodded. She looked at Sophia, who was staring out the window, her jaw clenched. Sophia, you'll speak of your joy at rediscovering your sister, your deep concern for her health, and your unwavering support. You will not cry, but your voice should waver with emotion. You are traumatized but strong for your family. Sophia gave a curt nod. She was a marionette, and Julian held the strings. When the publicist left, the silence in the room was heavy. You must be loving this, Sophia finally spat, unable to contain her bitterness. The poor pregnant victim. Everyone feeling so sorry for you. Lena turned her head slowly on the pillow. You think this is what I wanted? To be a pawn in your rich husband's game? To have my baby used as a prop in a PR stunt? You wanted something, Sophia retorted. Why else would you come? Was the money not enough? The money ran out, Lena's voice broke. Marcus found me. He took it. He said it was his right, as the father. I had nothing left. No money, no hope. I thought if you saw me, saw what he'd done, I thought my own sister would help me. The raw plea in her voice momentarily pierced Sophia's armor. She remembered a time years ago when they were just two girls hiding from their disappointing fathers, sharing secrets and dreams. The memory was a flicker of warmth in the cold calculation of her present. I'm here now, aren't I? Sophia said, the words tasting like ash. No, Lena whispered, closing her eyes. You're not. The Sophia I knew would have fought for me. She's gone. You're just one of them now. The words stung more than any accusation of cruelty. They spoke of a fundamental loss of self that Sophia felt in her bones. She had become the thing she'd always pretended to be. A Van Horn, cold, strategic, and utterly isolated. Later that day, a man in a sleek suit arrived. He was the family's head of security, Mr. Sterling. He debriefed Lena on Marcus, taking notes on his habits, his haunts, his threats. We'll find him, Miss Reed, Sterling said, his voice professionally reassuring. We'll ensure he cannot bother you or the Van Horn family again. Lena shivered. She knew what that meant. money, influence, and quiet pressure. Marcus would be neutralized. The problem would be removed. It should have been a comfort, but it felt like trading one kind of terror for another. She was now utterly dependent on the mercy of a family that saw her as a problem, protected by a man who saw her as a duty to his employer. The web of lies and control was tightening around them all, and there was no escape in sight. A week passed. Lena was discharged from the hospital and installed in a secluded guest house on the Van Horn estate, surrounded by high walls and discreet security. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage, her every need attended to, her every movement monitored. It was for her protection, Julian said, but it felt like containment. Sophia played her part perfectly. She visited Lena daily, always with a witness, a maid, a nurse, a security guard. She would bring expensive blankets and talk in a soft, concerned voice about nursery themes. The act was flawless, but her eyes were dead. She was going through the motions, a shell of a woman haunted by the ghost of Marcus Slate. Julian, meanwhile, had thrown himself into the hunt. Mr. Sterling's reports were frequent and frustrating. Marcus Slate had vanished. He'd cleared out of his grimy apartment, quit his job as a mechanic, and disappeared without a digital trace. It was as if he had been expecting them. This unnerved Julian more than any direct threat. A man who could disappear that completely was smart, prepared, and dangerous. He wasn't a simple thug, he was a strategist. One evening, as Julian reviewed security footage from the wedding for the 100th time, looking for any sign of Marcus in the crowd, he noticed something he'd missed. Before Lena's approach, a figure lingered near the service entrance. A man in a caterer's uniform, his cap pulled low. He wasn't doing anything suspicious, just leaning against a wall, watching the festivities. But as the first dance began, he stood up straight, pulled out his phone, and pointed towards the dance floor. Not to take a picture, but to film. He filmed the entire confrontation. He filmed Sophia's kick. He filmed Lena's collapse. And as the chaos erupted, he simply melted back through the service entrance and was gone. He hadn't just been there. He had been waiting for it. A cold dread washed over Julian. This wasn't a coincidence. Marcus hadn't just sent Lena. He had orchestrated the entire scene. He had wanted the humiliation. He had wanted the violence captured. He had wanted to destroy Sophia's perfect day from the inside. Julian had the footage enhanced. The man's face was mostly hidden, but there was a brief moment when he looked up, a smirk playing on his lips as Sophia drew back her foot. It was him, Marcus Slate. He had been there, in the heart of their security, watching his plan unfold. The revelation changed everything. Marcus wasn't hiding because he was scared. He was hiding because he was waiting. The public scandal was just phase one. He had something else planned. He was toying with them. Julian immediately upgraded security around the estate and Lena's guest house. He assigned a personal guard to Sophia, a silent, hulking shadow named Evans, who followed her everywhere. Sophia felt the noose tightening. The constant presence of Evans was a reminder that the threat was real and imminent. Her carefully controlled life was now governed by fear and paranoia. She jumped at every sudden noise, scrutinized every unfamiliar face in the small town when she was driven through it. One night she awoke from a nightmare, her heart pounding. The room was dark. She reached for the glass of water on her bedside table, and her hand brushed against something cold and papery, something that hadn't been there when she went to sleep. It was a single, faded photograph. A younger, happier Sophia, her head thrown back in laughter, was tucked into the side of a muscular man with dark, intense eyes and a possessive arm around her waist. Marcus, scrawled on the back in familiar, aggressive handwriting, was a message. "You can't hide behind their money forever, Sophia. I gave you your pretty life, and I can take it away. The game has just begun." A scream caught in her throat. He had been in her room. He had stood over her while she slept. The impenetrable security, the high walls, the armed guards. It was all a joke to him. He was a ghost, already inside the machine. And his message was clear. His revenge was not just about humiliation. It was personal. It was about reclaiming what he believed was his. The game indeed had just begun. Panic was a live wire under Sophia's skin. She scrambled out of bed, the photograph clutched in her trembling hand, and ran to the door. Evans was stationed right outside, as always. "He was in here," she gasped, thrusting the photo at him. "He was in my room." Evans took the photo, his expression unreadable. He did a swift, professional sweep of the bedroom and ensuite bathroom. He checked the windows, locked. Checked the balcony doors, secured. "No one came through this door, ma'am," he stated, his voice a low rumble. "And no one could have gotten past me." "But he was here," Sophia insisted, her voice rising hysterically. "How did this get here?" Evan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you certain it wasn't here before? Perhaps tucked in a book? A drawer?" His tone suggested he thought she was having a stress-induced delusion. The implication that she was losing her mind was almost as terrifying as Marcus's intrusion. Was it possible? Had the stress conjured this? But the photo was real. The handwriting was real. The cold feeling of his presence was utterly, undeniably real. She reported it to Julian, who listened with a furrowed brow. He reviewed the security logs and hallway camera footage himself. Nothing. No unauthorized access, no alerts. It was impossible. "Sophia," he said, his voice tired and strained, "the stress, it's getting to you. The doctors can prescribe something to help you sleep." He didn't believe her. The one person who was supposed to be her ally, even if it was for cynical reasons, thought she was cracking up. She was alone in her fear, isolated within the very walls that were supposed to protect her. The next day, a package arrived for Lena at the guest house. It was a large flat box, wrapped in plain brown paper. The security team scanned it for explosives or biological hazards, but it was clean. Inside, nestled in layers of tissue paper, was an exquisite hand-knitted baby blanket, impossibly soft and white. A small handwritten card was tucked inside. "For my child. Something to remember me by. -M." It was a message of chilling domesticity twisted into a threat. He knew where she was. He could get things to her. He was letting them know that their security was a sieve. Lena recoiled from the blanket as if it were a snake. "Get it away from me," she whispered, her face pale. This Julian could not explain away. This was proof. Marcus was not just a ghost. He was taunting them, demonstrating his reach. The hunt intensified, but it was like chasing smoke. That evening, as Julian sat in his study, a secure, encrypted email arrived in his private inbox. The sender was unknown. The subject line was, "A proposal." His blood ran cold as he opened it. The email contained 3 attachments. The first was the raw, high-definition video of Sophia kicking Lena from the angle of the caterer. The second was a scanned copy of the signed NDA Sophia had forced Lena to sign months ago, in which Lena agreed to disappear in exchange for a lump sum, effectively proving Sophia's knowledge and prior attempt to conceal her sister. The third was a DNA test result, dated from early in Lena's pregnancy, confirming Marcus Slate as the father. The body of the email was brief. "Mr. Van Horn, you have something I want. I have these things that you very much do not want made public. The video is just a taste. I propose a trade. You will dissolve your marriage to Sophia. You will publicly disavow her. You will ensure she is left with nothing. No money, no status, no protection. Once this is done to my satisfaction, you will have your silence, and I will have what is mine. Fail to comply, and every news outlet in the world receives this package. Your family's name will be mud. Your stock will plummet, and Sophia will be mine to deal with regardless. You have 48 hours. Julian stared at the screen, the words burning into his retinas. Marcus wasn't just a violent ex. He was a master manipulator. He had gathered his evidence meticulously. He understood power, leverage, and reputation. His demand wasn't for money. It was for total victory. He wanted Sophia broken, destitute, and delivered to him. Julian felt a sickening pull of temptation. It was a clean, if brutal, solution. Sacrifice Sophia, save the family. She had brought this upon herself. She had lied. She had hidden this monster. She had created this mess. He looked at a framed photo on his desk, taken just a month ago. Sophia was laughing, her head on his shoulder, her eyes sparkling with what he now knew was a lie. But the memory of that feeling, the illusion of love, still had a hook in him. He had 48 hours to choose between his family's legacy and the woman who had betrayed it, to choose between cold justice and a terrible, complicated mercy. The game was indeed underway, and Marcus had just made the first move, forcing Julian to decide what kind of man he truly was. The end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more heartwarming African stories.